Hey everyone, and welcome back to another episode of The Negotiation. On today's show, we speak with Elaine Ann, founder and director at Kaizor Innovation, a consultancy that helps companies research, strategize, and design new product or service innovations for the China market. Elaine and her colleagues will step in as the Fractional Chief Xperience Officer to help funded tech startups with their product market fit, customer discovery, and customer validation. Elaine is also the author of the book Xperience Innovation, in which she details a 7-step innovation methodology to guide foreign companies in creating products and services that translate well in the China market. We discuss the differences between UI, UX, and CX, how to know when you've achieved product market fit in China, defining the fractional C-suite executive role and function, and why it is vitally important to build the right local team when expanding to China. Enjoy.
In China, the people who own cars are relatively well off. The people who own BMWs, most likely, they don't drive it themselves. It's actually a driver. They hire a driver to drive them everywhere, right? So now, who's the end user? Is it the person who buys the car or the person who drives the car? And the person who drives the car might have grown up from like a suburb village area. So the whole context changes, right? When you're in such a different market.
Home to over 4 billion people, the Asia-Pacific region boasts one of the most powerful consumer markets on the planet. Not only is it home to half the world's under 30 population, but it's also home to more than half the world's internet users. It's a market no globally minded brand should ignore, but entering markets like China is no easy task. Just ask the likes of Microsoft, Google, Uber, and Facebook. Times are changing, and with the right partners, doors are slowly opening as more and more companies find success expanding into the markets of the Middle Kingdom. I myself spent 8 years in China, mostly as a venture capitalist, helping early-stage tech companies enter the Asia-Pacific market successfully. This show is dedicated to uncovering and examining successful China entry and growth strategies by interviewing the people behind those success stories. My name is Todd Embley, and welcome to The Negotiation, brought to you by WPIC Marketing and Technologies. Elaine, welcome to the show. Thanks for coming on today.
Well, thanks, Todd, for inviting.
As we usually do, how about a quick introduction of yourself and the work that you're doing?
Sure. My name is Elaine Ann. Ann is my last name. And I grew up from Hong Kong. And in the 90s, I spent 12 years in the US. I went to the US to study at Carnegie Mellon. And then I worked in the US in the first wave of internet companies like Razorfish. And also worked at like Philips Design on like Internet of Things back then in the 90s. And then after the dot-com bust, right, I went back to Hong Kong. Then I spent 18 years in Hong Kong, and it wasn't until last year I came back to North America, and now I'm in Vancouver, Canada. So in the 18 years that I'm in Hong Kong, I started my own company called Kaizor Innovation, and the focus is to help a lot of Western tech companies strategize and understand the China market. And right now in Canada, I also started another company, which is focused on helping tech startups do almost exactly what we help all those multinationals do, but in a much more succinct way and much faster. Because we're used to how China market is really fast, right? And we help them with product market fit, customer validation, customer discovery, etc., and user experience.
That's right. I am one of the directors of Founder Institute as well as the host of this podcast, and Founder Institute Western Canada. And we had you on, and you've been an amazing mentor and doing lots and lots of sessions and office hours and mentoring for a lot of the startups that go through there as well. So thank you for the work that you do.
Thank you. Yes.
So how about a brief description of your time working in APAC, working with APAC, really? You know, what did your work focus on, years that you were there, maybe, you know, after you came across, the times that you've gone back, some of that stuff? What are some of the highlights of your time?
Yeah, so I went back to Hong Kong year 2002, right? And then started my company. And the reason why I started my company is because I was in the user experience industry in the US for almost 12 years. And when I went back, honestly, back in 2002, a lot of companies didn't understand what I did because it wasn't yet digital transformation until maybe late after 2010 or even 2015.
I want to have you introduce kind of the user experience space. But I think a great place to start is to separate UI, UX, CX. Could you help us understand the differences there just for everybody so we're all on the same page before we really get into it?
Yeah, so when we say UX, the full word is actually user experience. However, I find that many different people have many different definitions of what it is. Our large clients, like multinational clients, like their definition is pretty on the same page. So in a large company, like even Google, right, there are in the user experience team, it's very specialized. There are people who do user research and do user testing, and they might never do design, okay? And there are interaction designers who design the flow of the product, the usability of the product, and there are visual UI designers, and sometimes even front-end developers that bridge the gap between the design and the programming part, okay? So all these roles, there could be 4 to 5 different roles, and they're all under the UX umbrella. And even sometimes the senior roles could be a UX strategy role, okay? But of course, usually tech startups don't have that luxury to hire 5 different people to do UX, right? So that's why I think sometimes the terminologies are confusing. And we see a lot of job descriptions saying UX/UI, right? But in reality, I think that's true for all different types of industries, right? Like the bigger the company, the more specialized the roles, right? And then for the China market, what we focus on is actually user experience strategy and user research and sometimes user testing. We actually never really do the design part because our clients, they have huge teams, right? They have a few hundred designers or researchers. What they need us for is they need to understand the differences in the China market and how that would impact their product. It could either be adjusting their product, or maybe in some instances, they just come with an open mind or an open question and just to discover what are their pain points and needs in a particular area that they might want to venture into.
And so your work, because I want to get this right. What is your specialty? Which one are you really deep diving into?
I would say product market fit, if it's a tech startup language, really. What we do in our industry, we actually do what we call ethnography. We actually follow people, we shadow people, we go to their homes. I've been to a lot of Chinese people's homes in China, like all different provinces and cities. And our clients would fly over, right? They would fly over with a team. We'll go to their homes. We'll understand their context of use, like what their homes are like, or what their offices are like, or what the retail stores are like. And then out of that exercise, interviewing a lot of people, we'll find out if there's an opportunity there, or if our client has to adjust their business. So I would say it is customer discovery and customer validation.
Interesting. From a broad level, let's call it your vertical, okay? Your industry, your space. What are the key things that people such as yourself, experts such as yourself who work in the space, what are you broadly trying to accomplish with your customers?
For example, we worked with some companies that are home appliances, right? So they sell refrigerators, basically. So the way refrigerators are designed in the West, you have ice dispenser on the front of the door, right? Mm-hmm. This really relates to lifestyle, right? Mm-hmm. So if you try to deep dive into Chinese people's lifestyle, you notice that a lot of Chinese people don't like drinking ice water. If you've dined with Chinese people, a lot of them would order hot water or warm water, right?
There's a belief that cold water in your system is bad for you. It's bad for your stomach, bad for your digestion, things like that.
Yeah. So on the surface, it might be, just there's a belief, but when you dig deeper, and here's where we come in, right? Because I grew up in Hong Kong. I grew up bilingual. And also the worldview, because I spent 12 years in the US and I grew up in a Chinese family. I think I see both sides because I would go to see Chinese doctors as well as Western doctors and eat different cuisines as well. So if you understand the Chinese concept of health, in fact, traditional Chinese concept of health is there's a concept of qi, as an energy, and there's the concept of meridian systems, right? In the body, right? And the reason why people don't like to drink cold water is because in the Chinese traditional medicine, qi, runs throughout your body, and cold water, it's like putting ice water in an engine, right? It's going to slow down your digestion and not very good for your body, right? And this actually permeates everything. Like there'll be phenomena that I think our Western friends would find really strange. Like, why do people like to go for foot massage and buy a foot massage chair for that is the price of a car, right? And massages in Asia is like really popular, right? That's why there are companies like Awesome that they specialize in massage chairs, right? And I've been Awesome is also a client previously, and they had the reverse problem, right? When we were training their user experience team, I was trying to convince them, and they're Singaporeans, right? I was trying to convince them to tell them, hey, you know what? Your product is not going to work for North American market. And they didn't believe it, right? That they actually have, they sell their massage chairs at Brookstone, which is like the sales channel in the US. But most of my Western friends, they would rather go for a hike instead of buying this huge massage chair in their homes. And that makes you hurt, right? Because the concept of health is different. Yeah, so that's where we do the cross-cultural translation. Yeah, in many different lifestyle like sectors, right?
Interesting. Yeah, I mean, it's funny. I was almost thinking that you're doing a little bit, I mean, not to compare what a podcast can do, but kind of similar intent where we're also trying to kind of bridge that cultural gap in a way of just through exploration. But that's fascinating, and I know that. Yeah, I mean, massages are incredibly popular there, so is, blind massage, cupping, acupuncture, everywhere, hot stones, all this stuff. I mean, the ways that they, are taking toxins out of your body or out of your skin or this and that, and taking the bone to the bottom of your foot and all the pressure points. That was probably the most painful thing I've ever done in my life, because I've never had a baby. So that was unbelievably painful, and they are they really believe that is an amazing release of pent up chi and kind of like all these benefits that come with it, and I'm thinking it just hurts. Yeah,
it's a totally different concept of health. I mean, we have Western clients with medical devices, right? And I'm always like, well, have you ever looked into the Chinese concept of health? Because it's huge, right? When they have a different concept, and even for food, right? So we have done plant-based meat projects for companies, and like, how do people view food, right? And even like the movement of having food like protein that's from worms, things like that, right? Like, how do people view it differently and in different markets? It's quite interesting,
right? So. In the work that you do when you're dealing with the customers, can you explain a little bit about, even the beginning, because it's, this isn't a traditional business working process, because you have, I'm guessing, and I'm maybe leading this question a little bit, but I'm guessing there's a lot of upfront kind of education that begins the entire working relationship that you now have to do in helping some of your companies and in the brands and what they want to do with an understanding. It's like a China 101.
Yes, I think the biggest challenge is sometimes our clients don't know what they don't know.
Right.
So how do you tell them what they don't know? Like they don't even know that, right? Mm-hmm. The approach that we've taken previously is actually a lot of our clients actually do fly to China previously, before COVID. So once they land in a different country and then you experience the place for like 5 to 10 days, you notice all these nuances, right? But I think it's harder if they've never been. They've never been to China. We have tons of clients who come over with just a credit card. And we're like, hey, you know what? Sometimes you can't even get cash, right? Like some restaurants don't take credit cards, and people assume that you can go everywhere with Google Map. I'm like, no, you can't, because there's no Google Map, right? I mean, at least unless you read Chinese with like Golda, right? At least maps, like the China version of it, or Baidu map, like you kind of like blind and deaf at the same time. And the biggest surprise for them is like you have to use VPN because a lot of them, they come over and we always have to warn them, hey, you have to like download all the apps that you want before you come over because you might not be able to access it. And sometimes they learn, right? At the second time they know.
Right. And, just in helping, companies find that product market fit and the advice, maybe first explaining, a little bit more of at a deep level, the concept as far as what your understanding as an expert is. What is product market fit? What does that look like? And maybe how do we know and are able to measure when we've achieved product market fit, just generally speaking? And then, if you don't mind, help us understand how that concept is approached in China versus the West.
I think when we're growing up from a certain culture, sometimes you don't see how things are different in another culture. I'll give you a solid example. Vacuum cleaners, okay? So we have a client who do vacuum cleaners. And in the US, people's houses are mostly 3 stories, right? And then it's mostly the wife who takes care of vacuum cleaning, maybe sometimes the husband, but much less in Asia, like especially in China. I mean, domestic helpers are really cheap, right? And especially even in Hong Kong, right? Everybody has a quotation made, a housekeeper, so to speak.
An IE.
IE, right, in China. Yeah. So the design of the vacuum cleaner in the US, especially people's size are bigger, right? In Asia, most women are 100 some pounds, 110, 120 pounds. So the ergonomics is completely different. The taste is different. Like what people think is good looking or not good looking, even colors and functions are different. The size of the homes are different. And the most different thing is in the US, I think there's a lot of carpeted homes. Right. In China, is all hardwood floors. And the biggest difference is like, I think average vacuum cleaners, maybe $200-$300 US, right? And then in China, you can hire several maids, which would not even be that price, right? So I think without understanding how the market is different, then you wouldn't be able to design something that fits the market, right? And even for things like cars, for example, in the US, I think middle-class families, everybody drives, right? Because it's hard to get to anywhere. In China, the people who own cars are relatively well off. The people who own BMWs, most likely, they don't drive it themselves. It's actually a driver. They hire a driver to drive them everywhere, right? So now, who is the end user? Is it the person who buys the car or the person who drives the car? And the person who drives the car might have grown up from like a suburb village area, right? So the whole context changes, right? When you're in such a different market. So I think the best way is for our clients to come over to immerse themselves for a week or two, and then be open-minded to listen to what end users have to say. And in some cases, they even bring prototypes over. We'll test it with them, with the end users in China. And, and then if they're open-minded enough, we'll help them brainstorm new solutions, right? Or adjusted solutions to the original product. You're
taking them over there, and they are perhaps they're going with the intent of seeing how well their current product fits. Your intent is likely, because you already know what's going to happen, is that your intent is to see how open their mind is going to be by the time they get back to reinventing their product altogether. Because, they're saying, I want to take my product to China, and you're saying, great, how are we going to go about, like, you need to help them find a new product market fit. It's not really about how to take the product there. It's how to find a new product market fit. Once we found that, then we'll hopefully have some data that will help us, run the next experiment, which is how to sell and who to sell to and at what price and what platform and that. But refinding product market fit is essentially the most important thing that anyone probably needs to do first.
Oh yeah, definitely. Otherwise, they'll be assuming that, just doing some translation would work. But I think most of the time, that's not the case, really. And beyond the product, I think one of the biggest mistakes that a lot of companies make is not building the right team locally. Like, if you reverse the psychology and say, okay, if a Chinese company wants to go to the US and they send Chinese people who don't speak English, and set up an office in California, how well is that going to work, right? Because their whole mindset is different. For example, in China, if you're used to China apps and maybe WeChat, right? The whole Chinese concept, everything is holistic and everything connects with everything else. So in WeChat, it's like 30 apps in one, right? This will never work in the US. Uber just does Uber and PayPal just does PayPal.
They'd be
it's not connected.
Yeah.
It's not connected. However, in China, you open up a 大众点评, right, which is like a Yelp, right? You select the restaurant. Right there, you can click for a taxi, and you can also see a map, right? And then you can also pay. So it's all interconnected. And I think it has to do with the sociology of the culture. Like, everything is guanxi, right? Everything is connected. Like, companies are both competitors and collaborators at the same time, which is kind of weird for Western concept, I think.
Do you think that North American companies, North American brand owners, brand decision makers, have they become better? Do they know more now? I mean, is my podcast having an effect? Do they know more now? Is your job getting easier?
I would say some of the very large companies that have been around in China for a long time, maybe 20, 30 years, they've learned their lessons, I would say. Like, we had a medical client. They've been in China for 10 years. And after 10 years, they finally realized, oh, wow, we actually need to cut all the features in half and charge at a much lower price. And then it sold really well. Right. But a lot of brands coming to China, they're like, oh, no, we're at the top of the game. Like, we're like top notch. We're not going to lower price. That's going to affect our branding. But China is a very different market. It's like almost a fortune at the bottom of the pyramid. That's why Pinduoduo works really well in China, right? Because most of Chinese people are maybe in the 3rd to 4th tier cities. The cities that Western companies come to even visit is only like Beijing and Shanghai, maybe, and Guangzhou, Shenzhen, like maybe maximum. Like, most of them don't even go to the 2nd or 3rd tier cities to see what's different, right? But I do think Western companies have a competitive edge in certain areas, like certain technological areas. And a lot of Chinese consumers also look up to some Western brands, especially with baby products or things that you put in your skin and things that you eat, right? There's a huge distrust in certain products, like locally made, right? So, I mean, I think it's a huge market, and China moves so fast, right? It's 5 times the pace than in the US. Like, when US companies come over, the research part takes a few months, right? In China, the whole development cycle is in 1 month. So if you take that time to develop for the China market and you don't build the right team in China, like, how are you going to catch up to the local competitors, right? Although some of them might not put so much R&D effort, but they move very fast and they refine things very quickly, right?
When you're helping a company find product market fit, say a company that is coming to America and you're working with them versus a company that's going to China? Is there strategies? Is there tools? Are there platforms, even social medias, or the tests and experiments? Can you talk a little bit about what you're using and how you're helping them figure out that data, and then once they get the data, how to actually understand what it says?
Okay, so we do help Western tech companies in China, but then for companies coming to North America, we mostly help tech startups. We don't help mainland Chinese large companies over here. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think there's a huge work cultural difference mm-hmm. between the two. And it's funny because, like, for example, our Western clients, even like companies like Google, Airbnb, when they come over, like a whole team of like 10, 15 people comes over, right? And then they all come over at different times. It's not one single flight because everybody has their own schedule. Chinese people never travel that way. Mm. If you're from the same company, if Huawei comes over, I don't think they're going to come in 18 different flights, right? So it's collectivism versus like individualism thing. And coming back to your question, yeah, so we don't really help mainland Chinese companies come to US at all. We help tech startups, especially now in Canada, the Startup Visa program. We're helping a lot of Hong Kong tech founders come over here to Canada. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. But then for them, we actually use the same methodologies. We'll help them validate their business model, help the tech startups validate the business model in North America. Because of COVID, we can't really go out to users' homes or offices. So we do online interviews, one-on-one interviews. The client, the tech startups founders are in the call. We will come up with a set of questions together with them. So all the interviews will be consistent. And actually 9 out of 10 times, the original business model is not what the market needs either, right? So after like the 20th interview, we actually see, actually your business model should switch this way, tweak that way, or this is actually a better way to do this. And because there is this evidence from the market, from the end users, their business plan and pitch is much stronger, right? When they pitch to investors over in North America.
Who do you think is more easy to work with, more malleable, more open to understanding they don't know what they don't know kind of thing?
I think it depends on the company. It's not
culturally based.
Yeah. But I would say the founders coming from Hong Kong, most of them are quite open-minded because they're coming to a new place, right? They're open to learning. But I would say in terms of ability to execute, of course, the multinational companies are way better at executing what they discover. As long as the multinational companies, they find the right team to do that. Because I've seen many cases where the decision-making is still in the US, right? They'll do this customer discovery or market fit. However, they'll go back to the US to do the design, which I think is the wrong strategy. They should actually first build a local team. We could also help them do that and find the right people, because otherwise, whatever the research they come up with might not be able to be implemented. It'll get lost somehow, or be interpreted in the wrong way, I would say.
How have the best practices around finding proper product market fit, UI, determining and designing UI, UX, CX, how has that, because I know tech has had a tremendous impact on not only how it's done, because they've done it at speed and at scale, but also the tools and the technology to be able to do it. Can you talk a little bit about how, the work that you do and your professional landscape, how has that evolved over the last 10 years or so?
I guess, now that we have big data, I know Chinese companies use a lot of data because they have a lot more data, right? It's like 1.3 billion people data, and people are not really concerned about privacy at all in China compared to the US. Yeah, that companies use a lot of data to look at patterns and all that. But I would argue, on the other hand, that sometimes having data might not mean you can read insights. Yeah, those are two different things, right? Mm-hmm. And sometimes the work we do, because we actually meet a lot of real people, dig into their lives, follow them, shadow them. We actually need to read in between the lines of like what are the opportunities. Sometimes the machine can't read that, right? So I would say maybe big data analytics and all that would probably help, right? Identify things faster. For example, what one company like Tencent actually has a survey that you can get feedback back within 24 hours. Wow. That's pretty fast, right? I mean, China is amazing in terms of scale and speed. You would think if it's large, it's probably slow, right? But it's not when it's top-down thinking, right? So sometimes they can implement something very, very fast. And even supermarkets like Hema, Alibaba has this Hema supermarket where you basically can use your mobile phone, go in, pick up some stuff, scan the code, pay right on your phone, and walk out, right? You don't have to line up at all. And of course, there are all these surveillance cameras scanning you. So sometimes what works in China might not work somewhere else just because it's a different landscape, right? And consumers are probably not going to be comfortable in the US being scanned and surveillanced. But people in China are okay. So it's apples and oranges sometimes.
Your book, Xperience Innovation, Designing and Strategizing for the Next $1 Trillion Market in China. There's a lot of amazing stuff in here. Definitely a read for anybody in our audience. There's so many things I wanted to ask about this. One of them was, and I don't know, I don't want you to give away the secret sauce here by asking this, but you talk about a 7-step methodology that teaches businesses how to develop products and services that can cross those cultural barriers between the East and the West. Could you talk a little bit about that methodology?
Yes, sure. Actually, it's quite a similar methodology that we help multinationals like Google, Airbnb with, but at a much accelerated rate for the China market. And because China moves very fast, like it's like 5 times faster, that's why I think it will also work for tech startups. Because tech startups don't have 3 months to do like research, right? You don't have 3 months to do product market fit. You probably need to build your product in 3 months. And also, I think if tech startups focus on a niche and also take into consideration all the cultural differences, because I think very large companies, sometimes they cannot do that. Let's take the example of a fridge, right? So a multinational company in home appliances might not be able to cater so specifically to a market to say, for example, make a kimchi fridge for Korean market, right? Like they can't be so specific because they need to come up with products that work all over the globe, right? But smaller companies, like mid to small size companies, might be able to. And if you look at even just in the food category, the way Chinese people eat, and it's a huge market, right? Like when we did a lot of research in China, we went to a lot of homes, and you would notice in South China that many people have 2 fridges at home. And Todd, I don't know if you've noticed with the time you've been there.
I definitely have.
Okay, 2 people, 2 fridges, especially in South China, because one fridge is for fresh food and the other fridge is for all the soup materials, like goji berries and even like expensive food like abalone and sea cucumber and all that, right? And some of them even requested locks for the fridge. So the whole lifestyle and diet is different that I think big companies can't really address that. It's only smaller companies who will be able to. And it's a gold mine, as I see it, that hasn't been tapped into. Because I see a lot of the Chinese companies, tech companies, are very good at emulating Western tech, right? Especially in the early days. I don't think I've seen really culturally based innovation yet. Especially we were talking about concept of health, concept of food is different. Like even concept of beauty is different, right? We've worked with P&G previously, and if you talk to Chinese women, they want to be white, right? Which is completely different from like if you talk to people in North America or Europe, like getting a tan is more like a sign of you're healthy and you have time to go outdoors, right? But in Chinese concept, like having dark skin is actually means that you work outside doing hard physical labor. That's why you're dark. So it's very different interpretations and concept, right?
Which would translate, into how you might design some of your marketing and your graphics. And, no white person should have any inflated ego over the fact that, they're trying to look white. It's more that they're trying to look less sun-kissed than others because of the that understanding that the darker your skin, the more you work outdoors, therefore you're less affluent than your neighbor who has more of the untouched by the sun skin.
Oh, I have you seen this face bikini? No,
like a bikini for the face.
Yeah, so basically, women in certain parts of China, like Qingdao or something, they would wear a swimsuit with a face mask that hides all the skin on their face, so they won't get a tan on their face. Yeah, which kind of might be really funny, right? Like
yeah, but that's another cultural thing. Not only is that okay, yes, to us it would be kind of haha funny, but you don't see Chinese people in China, when somebody is wearing this, stop, look, mention, gawk, comment. It's not like that. There's no embarrassment in wearing something like that there at all. They don't even think twice about it.
Yeah, actually, even in Hong Kong, right? Some of my friends, when they go hike, they'll bring an umbrella and even like wear long sleeve.
Yeah.
To cover all their skin, especially women, right? It's because they don't want to get half tanned on their arm.
And it's not preventing skin cancer either. Not most of the time. It is really just the preference to have lighter skin versus darker skin, just because of a wealthier perception.
Yes, and maybe also because Asian women are tinier, like in terms of height. So if you're dark, you look even smaller, right? There are all different reasons why people do that. But I'm just saying that I mean I love this type of work because there is sometimes no right or wrong. You go to very different cultures and you get super shocked at how people think what is good or bad, and it really changes your perception of things. Oh, I have one more story to share with you.
Please.
Okay, so one time we were helping a client understand mobile games and stuff like that. So we went to a family in China, and the couple tells us that what they do is they sell buns as a business. She says every day she gets 1,000 RMB as income, right, from one of her stores, right? And then you'd be like, oh, 1,000 RMB would be like how much?
150
in
bucks.
US dollars. Yeah, $150, and you're like, oh, that's so little, right? And then the next sentence she said is she has 60 stores all over China. and then you do the math, and you're like, oh my God, this is over $10 million business, right? Yeah, so the scale of China is just unimaginable. And also that couple, it's really funny. They play video games like night and day. And they would spend like 400,000 RMB per year on virtual games, like virtual tools, right? Like virtual guns and all that.
Wow.
So
like in-game purchases.
In-game purchases, right? Like that's why maybe Tencent is making so much money, right?
Oh, probably. Yeah. You mentioned in the book that China is definitely, or you surmise, part of it, a theme is that China's moving away from being the world's factory of copycats to becoming a world leader in innovation. Can you maybe just speak to that or give some examples of, even just talking about, okay, where did this reputation of being a country of copycats come from? But how have they been able to move past it so quickly, and maybe a demonstration of how they're actually not copycatting, but actually innovating?
I would say, depending on how you define innovation, though.
Good point.
I think China is very good at micro innovations and refining something that already exists very fast. But in terms of like fundamental innovation, I still think, US companies have an edge, and it has to do with education, right? And culture. I think, in the early days, a lot of Chinese companies basically, copied over business models from the US, right? And they are able to scale very fast and run very fast because the market is just 5 times bigger, right? So they just have to kind of plop the model over and refine it, basically. And sometimes it has evolved way beyond the original version, right? So in the early days, like there was WhatsApp and then WeChat, and originally WeChat was just a messaging app, right? But then it became like there was Moments, and that's like Facebook, and then there's payments, right? And there's like, you can see your doctor, like you can do everything on WeChat now. And it looks nothing like WhatsApp. Right. So it has definitely, moved a long way. But I think in terms of innovation, you do need let people think freely. I do think, because I was also educated in the US, right, in university. And I was pretty shocked when I went to the US that my professors will ask me what I think. Like in Asia, you never get elderly people or professors asking what you think, because you're always the person who only listens to old people, right? Older people. So I think cultural diversity and also a more relatively flat working hierarchy is more conducive to innovation, because not all ideas can come from the top, right? It has to come from the bottom, and also have a system where you reward innovation and reward the protection of IP. Right. So that's my view. Right. So I do think that if China needs to be leading the world in innovation, something's got to change. Yeah.
Interesting. Because I think everybody looks at China as the place to pay attention to. I know that's why a lot of people listen to this podcast as well, is that China is the place to pay attention to if you want to see the future. If you want to see the future, go to China. Would you agree with that?
I would say in certain things, yes, like e-commerce and mobile payment. Yes, China can implement it much faster because there's not so much concern about privacy and because it's very top down, right? Mm-hmm. And certain companies are much bigger, like allowed to be big, right? Like the BATs are allowed to be big, right? By the government. So they can do that. So I would say, like, in terms of businesses, especially small businesses, sometimes it's a little more unpredictable in terms of the business environment.
About your book, Xperience Innovation, tell us anything else that you think everybody needs to know, especially where to find it, where to buy it, where to listen.
Okay. Yeah, actually, you can go to my website. It's www.elaine, ELAINE-ANN.com, and you can buy my book from there. And I think I highlight how China is different. It's a very fast-paced market. The culture is different. The business environment is different. So I had a conversation with another friend where I think we pretty much agree. Like China is almost like it could be a huge gold pot at the end, but there would be crocodiles and snakes in the middle, and you need to, You need to be able to hop through that to get to the goal part of mine. So I think like certain companies have done it and able to do it. Like, for example, Dyson did really well, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think China made Dyson the richest person in the UK. And of course, because they are a lead innovator in their product category, I don't think they had to adjust so much because they do have the branding. So I think knowing how you are differentiated in the China market is important. For every single product category, there are so many competitors, like especially low-end products, right? Even sanitary napkins have like a few hundred brands in China. Like, how do you differentiate yourself, right?
Yeah.
Even vacuum cleaners, like for our clients, there are many, many cheap versions of it, right? So you really need to know, like, why should Chinese consumers pay 3 to 4 times or sometimes even 8 times the price of something made locally for that? But of course, in certain product categories, if they believe that your product is way more superior and it's way more safe, it's way more trustable, people are willing to pay. And because the market is so big, we call it the mass affluent people, which is 400 million people in China. That's bigger than the US market already, right? US is 230 million, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so China just has the size, right? So you just have to focus on a niche area that you're good at, especially for smaller companies. And plus, recently there's this whole trend about live streaming, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like for example, a fashion store can be sitting in New York, not move a single finger, not fly to China, but you can live stream your product and Chinese consumers will be buying in China from their mobile phone from a store that's in New York.
That's amazing.
Right. And that's something interesting to think about.
Okay. Well, any last tips or advices for any of our companies or brands that are looking to go to China?
Well, definitely, I think it's do your due diligence. I don't think you have to be overly worried if you find the right partners to work with and even build the right teams, right? I think where it falls short is not building the right team. So I think having the right talent, especially I think Western companies need to know that there are many types of Chinese also. Yeah, there are mainland Chinese, there's Hong Kong Chinese, there's Singapore Chinese, there's Taiwanese Chinese, there's American-born Chinese. So just even knowing that difference is important because you might be hiring the wrong people for that market, right?
Is hiring a little bit different? I mean, can you take the same hiring strategy from how you built your Western team to and then take it over there and be kind of putting it through the same?
Oh no, definitely not. We had a client, a Western client in China who told us that when he first landed China, he was in Beijing. He's a lawyer, right?
Mm-hmm. And
the US way of dealing with hiring and firing is you fire people immediately. Mm-hmm. And then what ended up happening was like the people in China who got fired, the whole village came and surrounded his company building for a whole week. And he called the police. And the police was like, well, this is none of our business. It's between you and your employees. So he wasn't able to go home for a whole week.
Wow.
You know, like it's a huge cultural difference, right? I think people in China don't see our relationship as contractual. People see relationship as long-term things, right? Which, number one, takes a lot more time to build the trust. And once you build the trust, it's almost like it's for life, right? Whereas I think US business is very transactional. Even when we do research, right? I think the US version is you go in, you do the research, buy, then you never see the user again, right? And this transactional way of working doesn't like rub people that well. In China, especially, even if you have money, you might not be able to find the right user. I think that's why our business also exists, is because people don't trust organizations. People trust friends and family. And that's a huge difference.
Which would make it a lot harder to find product market fit accurately.
Yeah. Because you can't just say, I'm Google, sign up for this, because they might be like people in China might be like, number one, I don't even know if you're the real Google, because it could be fake, right? So they only trust it if it's referred from a friend or a family member.
And that would obviously impact buying decision pathology, really.
Oh, actually, buying in China is also amazing. Like, we've seen group buys for even refrigerators, right? Like, people will be living in a complex, and then, they will know their neighbors, and they'll go to a neighbor's home and see, oh, you have a Samsung fridge. It's really good. Oh, why don't we gather a bunch of people from the vicinity to do a group buy? We've even seen car companies parked at next to downstairs where the elderly people would mingle with their grandkids. So they basically bring the car to where they live, right? Instead of asking people to go to the car showroom. So they bring the car to these housing complexes. And then when the grandparents sees it, they will go home and tell their sons who are in their maybe 20 or 30s to go buy the car. So the marketing strategy is all really different, I think. Yeah, doing advertising in China, like if you have a lot of money, it might work. But if you don't have a lot of money, because the market is so big, just spending money is like a drop of water in an ocean, right? So having the right strategy will be really important.
Well, Elaine Ann, founder and director of Kaizor Innovation, thank you very, very much for being on the show today.
Thanks, Todd.
Growing a company is hard. Doing it in a foreign market? Exponentially so. The best piece of advice I can give you is not to do it alone. When you start looking across the pond for further expansion possibilities, and I sincerely hope that you do, make sure you choose the right partners to do it with. My good friends at WPIC Marketing and Technologies have almost 20 years of experience helping brands just like yours enter China. I hope you enjoyed this episode of The Negotiation, and if you're interested in being a guest or want to connect with me or any of our team, please reach out to us at podcast@wpic.co. And be sure to rate, comment, and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. 再见.